Okay. Well, thank you and welcome to our presentation today by Bob Borland and Wayne Shelton. And this is the ATF National Response Team talking about the use of the ANSI ASQ G1 standard to drive excellence in their programming. So this webinar is really going to be good, and actually I really appreciate how diverse our participants in the application and use of the G1 standard is, and we can learn a lot from them. So it's a free webinar, so I'm glad that you guys are here. We're going to keep it moving. So if we get to the next slide, please. All right. So again, today's webinar is brought to you by us, American Society of Quality, and the ASQ Government Division specific of ASQ. We are a division of ASQ. We boast a great deal of members. Now, with ASQ being the voice quality throughout the world, we have about 80,000 members across the globe, and we're going to see some of those members here really soon at the World Conference, WCQI 2022 in Anaheim, California. But as to the government division, we are one division out of 26 total divisions. It might actually be 27. I believe they added a financial services division. But we are the government division, and we proudly boast that we are a community of practitioners that's focused on quality and performance improvement for government at all levels: federal, state, local, and even international. Now our composition, we are composed of people who are leaders in government, former leaders in government, employees of government, experts, so seasoned experts, consultants, practitioners, academics, so like university professors, students, and we'd like to get even more of those students to perpetuate the next generation, and other engaged members in the public sector, and so residents as well. And we would ask you today, and we're going to keep asking you, at the World Conference and beyond, join our communities. Government's a space, a common space for all of us, and we all want quality there. All right, so following today's webinar into next month, so we didn't even stop our programming for next month due to the World Conference. We actually have another webinar coming up in May, which is called Quantifying Your Culture and How to Measure and Visualize Your Cultural Transformation. For more information, go to that website that you see here above, or below actually, and go ahead and register. And as we get more in the pipeline, and we do have more coming in the pipeline, we'll announce it on this particular event page for our ASQ Government Division site. Now, throughout this webinar, we really want to drive interaction, with our speakers. They have a lot to share with you, and I'm sure that you will have some things that you'd like to know more about. So at the bottom, you go ahead and use the Q&A tab. If you don't see the Q&A tab for some reason, go ahead and put your question in the chat, and we will round up all these chat questions and Q&A, preferably Q&A. And at the back end of the presentation, we will drive this content to our presenters today. And for more information on how to, please go back. Back one. Previous, up. Go up to previous. Scroll all the way up. There you go. All right. About to finish it. About to do the handoff. I know they're trying to say get on with it. All right. So for more information, you can contact our division officers, which you will see at the end of the presentation, and the speakers about this presentation, which you'll also see at the end of the presentation. And for those who would like to have a copy of this presentation, generally we'll have it on our community site that you see below a few days after the presentation. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers today, Bob Borland and Wayne Shelton. I'm handing it over to Bob. So thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Larry, and thank you to the ASQ Government Division for giving us the opportunity to speak today. Today we're going to talk about primarily the ASQ ANSI G1 standard that's brand new, and how ATF's NRT team has adopted this as another tool in our goal of being held to the highest standards of what we do. So kind of to go over the three areas that we're going to talk about today. The first thing is I'm going to talk a little bit about the National Response Team. Some of you may know what it is or have heard of it, some of you may not. But basically, it's a rapid response team that was created to provide subject matter experts as kind of a force multiplier for significant fire and explosives incidents, not only inside the U.S., but also outside the U.S. as well. The second thing we're going to talk about today is the accreditation that the NRT achieved back in 2019 by the ANSI National Accreditation Board. This was for ISO IEC Standard 17020-2012, and it was for demonstrating technical competence in the field of forensic inspection and scene documentation. And then lastly, but not the least important, is we're going to talk about how all this relates to the ASQ ANSI G1 2021 standard. So let me launch into a little bit of background on the ATF Natural Response Team. This program was begun in 1978, and it was based on a need for basically a rapid response team to help assist not only ATF, but other federal, state, local entities with responding to and investigating large-scale significant fire and explosive incidents. This is part of the authority that ATF has under the United States Criminal Code, and so it was definitely in line with the mission to do this. Plus, there was no such thing at the time that could do this. Since then, the team now has been set up as three separate teams. They're divided by geographical areas, as you can see, the East, Central, and West. Every team has a permanent team leader. There is a small cadre of full-time members, and the team is predominantly made up of part-time members. It's important to note that all the members of this program are very extensively trained and have a lot of experience in conducting fire and explosive investigations before they can even be selected, or at least apply to be selected, into the program. So it's not a program that adopts people and then trains them how to do it. They basically have to know how to do this at a very high level before they can even get into this program. And the program is managed by the National Center for Explosives Training and Research. That's who Wayne and I work for here on the Redstone Arsenal in Huntsville, Alabama. And a little bit about the team itself. So as I mentioned, the team is comprised of mostly veteran special agents because of the requirements to even get on this team. Typically, they're going to have to be a more senior person on the job. They have to have expertise in areas of fire origin, cause determination, post-blast analysis, fire and explosion investigations. But the team also consists of other technical specialists. We have forensic chemists, electrical and fire engineers. We have accelerant and explosive detection canine teams. We have intelligence specialists, medics, forensic auditors, digital media specialists, and other technical and legal experts based on the scope of the incident. It may be a particular type of incident that requires some other type of technical expertise. The team has, or the program I should say, maintains approximately 30 plus response vehicles that are strategically located throughout the U.S. These vehicles are fully equipped specifically for the purpose of working fire and explosion scenes. Now, most importantly, from the beginning, there was a culture that was established in this program, and it is very much alive and kicking today as we speak, and that is the team concept culture. It was always felt from the beginning that this team would be not a team to come in and take over an incident, but to actually supplement the agencies that were that had jurisdiction on the incident. So that's very important because, you know, politically speaking, if you will, sometimes that can be a touchy issue when a federal agency such as ATF comes in and brings a lot of resources that, you know, a local or state or other federal agency might feel that we're trying to take over. And that was never the concept of this program from the very beginning, and it's held together very well over the years. Not only that, but it's an effective investigative methodology. It was part of what helped us get accredited to ISO 17020 in the first place. So I'm not going to show this video, but if you're interested, there is a YouTube link on there, and I think the attendees will have access to the presentation later. It's just a very brief overview of the team and what they do. The reason we're not going to play is we found out that on the receiving end, a lot of people might have bandwidth issues, and the video would seem kind of disjointed or would lock up and buffer or whatever. So for today's purpose, I'm going to skip through that. And then just a little kind of overview of some stats. So since 1978, the team is currently, as of April 14th of this year, gone on 887 callouts. So it averages around 16 plus minus callouts per year. And then you see a list of just some national events that I think most everyone is aware of that the NRT had been involved with. I personally was a member of the NRT for a little over 4 years, and I did participate in the TWA 800 investigation. But as you can see, and probably the most recent incident of notoriety was the fire on the amphibious assault ship USS Bonhomme Richard, which actually had to be scuttled as a result of a fire on that ship. So before G1, the NRT basically was kind of had a vision, not on my part, but on others, that we wanted to always be held to the highest standard within what we do. And that was a vision that our executive management has had all along. And basically, it was also part of a recommendation that all federal agencies, forensic services, be accredited to some type of universal standard. So basically, the reason for this is because it's public and customer assurance. The NRT is a significant face of ATF out there in the community, especially when there's an incident. As everyone knows, today's the 27th anniversary, I believe, of the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It's, you know, when an incident like that happens, it's imperative for law enforcement, especially at the federal level, to put on our best face, our best abilities, and help deal with those issues. So the accreditation did require NCDER to formally establish quality goals and objectives for the program. It did mean that we were going to be formally committed to performance management and continued improvement when warranted. And also, this was all in line with one of ATF's strategic goals for relevant accreditation of fire and explosives training and related forensic services. So that's a key component of all this, is the executive commitment. No executive commitment, these kinds of things are just not going to happen. So the standard, ISO 17020, for those of you who are not familiar, it is the conformity assessment requirements for the operation of various types of bodies performing inspections, and in the case of the standard, inspections equates to investigations. And as you can see, you know, that standard's meant to ensure that, and this would apply to whatever body was being accredited, that they have the right people doing the job. That means properly trained and competent. It means that we are doing things the right way per industry standard policies and procedures, that we are providing accurate results that are also unbiased, and we're continually focused on customer satisfaction, and we'll talk about that in more detail here shortly. And then the commitment to continuous improvement, and part of that with the accreditation standard comes annual proficiency assessments of key team personnel. Again, before all of even accreditation started, kind of a unique thing that happened at NCDER was the creation of the Accreditation Center of Excellence branch. Now, I'm the branch chief / quality manager for that branch, and Wayne is part of our staff of 4 subject matter experts that make up that branch. And what's unique about it is our branch is wholly dedicated to quality management, accreditation being one aspect of it. There's not a lot of entities like that in the federal government, and but hopefully we'll see more of that, especially with some of the things we'll talk about down the road. But so with that being said, we spearheaded the process of creating and implementing the ISO 9001 QMS for NCDER, and with Wayne being my co-presenter, I have to put a lot of credit to Wayne on being the actual person who helped do a lot of the designing of that system. So the basic requirements of our system have to be ISO 9001 conforming. That comes with any ISO accreditation, and that is as most everyone knows, that standard basically can cover any agency, any type of entity, products and services, and it's NCDER is one of only 2 entities within ATF to have a formalized 9001 compliant QMS. The other being our ATF forensic labs, which are accredited to ISO 17025. Also, kind of underlying all of this and our desire to do this was a recommendation from the National Commission on Forensic Sciences. Basically, their recommendation was that all forensic science service providers become accredited to some type of universal standard. And that basically meant, external government, if it existed, which it did in this case. And then, as you can see, we went through this process, and it is a very, very comprehensive assessment. I'll leave it at that. Wayne maybe Wayne thinks it's not quite as bad, but we did go through the process, and we did achieve accreditation on May 29th, 2019. You can see our actual certificate there. And also to note that we are the first and only U.S. federal law enforcement scene investigative unit accredited to this ISO standard. So with that being said, and we created our QMS, now it was time to take a look at, formalizing those quality objectives for the NRT itself. And like any program, when you're brainstorming about what it is you do and how you do it, to the NRT managers and the executive staff of ATF, it basically boiled down to customer service. And when I say customer service, it's our customers are typically with the NRT ATF field divisions in which the incident occurs, other federal, state, and local public service agencies. So say you have a fire in Los Angeles, California, there's a lot of jurisdictions there that would have something to say about the incident. LAPD, LA Fire Department, LA County Sheriffs. There may be other federal agencies. The state of California may have an interest in it. And those are our customers because we are only coming at their request. We do not self-dispatch. So there are tiered levels of responses in terms of how the NRT responds, but we don't go anywhere unless our assistance is requested. And so that was our #1 quality objective, was customer service. So we use a Likert scale of the 1 to 5 for our survey results, and a SurveyMonkey. The SurveyMonkey is the tool we use to do these surveys, and a link to the survey is provided to each and every customer on every call out. Now, that doesn't mean they have to do this. It's a voluntary thing, of course, but we do get a pretty good response rate with that. And as you can see, historically, our actual average overall satisfaction scores for the NRT have been between the 4.8 to 5.0 range, which exceeds our quality objective of a minimum of 4.0. Kind of important to note there, since the program was started in 1978, has never received a single formal customer complaint about its performance or competency, and that's saying a lot. Now, the other big objective was not only did we want the customer to be satisfied, but timeliness was critical. When you have an incident like Oklahoma City, it's just not acceptable to anybody that the response takes days or weeks before it gets started. It's very critical to have that response within a very, very short period of time. And so the standard basically for the NRT, and it has been this way pretty much since the program started, is the 24-hour rule. And so within 24 hours, once the NRT is activated, again, remember, they're not self-dispatched, so it's not 24 hours from the time of the incident. It's 24 hours once the team is requested and approved to deploy. At least one NRT member shall be on scene and perform some activity, which may include initial assessment of the scene. Now, I can tell you from practical experience, typically what happens is once the team is activated, the whole team is typically there and prepared to do their initial brief within 24 hours. So that's a critical quality objective in addition to the customer satisfaction. We have close to 100% success rate on meeting this metric. Interesting enough, I think last year there was one where the metric was not met, but it had to do with a blizzard that was occurring at the time of the incident. And so it took the team a little extra time to get to the scene. And then thirdly, continual improvement. And by this, there is annual management and program reviews of the program. It has to be rated based on a lot of different factors. So as you can see there below, the performance metrics, you know, are we meeting the timeliness and the customer satisfaction minimums for a success? The financial data, you know, is there enough money being put in the program? Is it, you know, that kind of stuff. Internal audits, which are done regarding the proficiency testing, opportunities for improvement recommendations, risk assessments to the program, maintaining accreditation, and more. So all of these data and the metrics are components of the evidence-based evaluation and decision-making that's done by the management and program review of the program. So just to give you a quick snapshot and kind of how we keep track of some of this stuff, this is from calendar year 2021, customer satisfaction and feedback. So you can see every call out has a unique number, and you can see the locations on there. And then the metrics that are being recorded on the survey are timeliness of delivery, responsiveness to customer need, and quality of service. And with those scores, there's an overall rating by the location. And you can see on the example here, there are a couple of NAs, and that was because no surveys were either sent or there was no response. And got several 5.0s there as well. So very high scores for this program based on those quality objectives. Here's an example on the survey form. We're also looking for comments because these can be helpful to clarify how we're being scored. And I just pulled this one up because it was a pretty good example of the impact the NRT can have to an agency or agencies when we respond. You notice there the city of Fruita, Colorado, which is basically a suburb of Grand Junction, Colorado, has 18 sworn employees. The ATF brought more personnel than our entire agency to assist, and would have been an overwhelming experience without their help. So you can see that the impact can be very well regarded at the local level. In addition to the NRT having metrics that we look at, NCDER as a whole, we do this for all our programs, and you can see some of the scores. I won't go through what all those acronyms mean, but basically they're all either explosives or fire investigation related training courses. We do a lot of advanced training courses as part of NCDER's mission, and you can see where the NRT falls in there. Again, all of the programs, the metrics that we're doing are all above that 80% minimum that is mandated in our quality objectives. So 4.0 on the Likert scale. Then we get to the, Wayne, did you have a comment? Or?
Well, it's just one note is some of the blank programs that were on the previous chart were because of COVID, and we canceled a lot of classes or didn't have classes from that year.
That's right. Yep, thanks. So we get to the new standard, and the new standard basically is about establishing guidelines for evaluating the quality of government operations and services. And when that was approved, and of course, I should mention that Wayne was a part of that ASQ committee that actually helped create that standard. So kudos to Wayne on that as a side gig. But as you can see, the essential mandate of the new standard is basically to hold management accountable for what's occurring out there. So we are collecting these performance metrics for the team, and then in addition, we're looking at how does that reflect on management? How, what's their accountability? So of course, if the scores start tanking, there could be lots of reasons for that, but it could also reflect supervision not holding everybody accountable for what needs to occur in that program. And then we look at this as, the G1 standard is really, it's a tool that helps to facilitate change management. It basically is mandating accountability out there within the government, and we definitely, at NCDER, we feel very transparent about that accountability. The NRT, now with our QMS to get ISO accredited, we also felt that would probably allow us to put forth an application to be assessed under the G1 standard. And under this standard, the presence of quality in government need to include measurable and tangible performance metrics and the results which the management can be held accountable for. And because of what we had done with the program, these metrics have always been a long time part of that program. We have a long, and this kind of gets into a little bit of the standard with system mapping or process mapping. And we had a system and we had a process, it just wasn't formalized until we really started to work with Rich Mallory on the creation of the G1 standard. And we thought, well, we actually have a process, let's actually map it out and see what it looks like. But part of that process is it starts for the personnel at the very basic level. So when ATF agents are first hired on the job, they begin with their ATF basic training. Now, that's basic training for ATF, but it includes about 4 weeks of advanced level fire and explosives training. There's a lot of our folks that come out of that basic training that are far more better trained at doing this than than other folks who are out there doing this kind of thing. So they start out with that, and then once they start working the job, because of our on-the-job training program, a lot of them are going to actually get actual practical experience working these types of incidents. And they could be smaller, they could be NRT scope level. So as they're doing these types of investigations, eventually, and this is purely voluntary, they may decide that they really enjoy those type of investigations. I know when I was a younger agent, I definitely enjoyed, especially working bombing investigations. And so my natural path and the path of others is to go into one of our personnel certification programs for either explosives or fire investigation. If you're accepted into those programs, you get a lot more extensive advanced training in these fields. Both of them currently now have 2-year candidacy periods to achieve that certification. So that's a lot of additional training, a lot of additional experience that they're getting in that field. And then with the additional relevant valid credentials and experience that are related to NRT, only then can they actually apply to be in the program. And only then could they also be selected if they meet the criteria. So this process ensures the NRT is continually staffed with highly competent subject matter experts. It's the same process for other technical positions, whether they're engineers, forensic chemists. They have their own process of getting to their level of technical expertise. And we decided that, well, if we could actually create a process map, I mean, that could serve as an example to other agencies about how they could do something similar for their own programs or create one. I mean, you could create a program from scratch with this kind of a method. And well, I'll show you an example of it here in just a second. But again, we are submitting to an independent assessment by ASQ. And we currently have almost finished our package and are getting ready to submit it. As those of you who've kind of been following this standard know, there was one other agency from the U.S. courts that was the first agency to go through this successfully, and we're hoping that we'll be the second to go through it.
Actually, it was the clerk's office of the U.S. Court of Appeals.
Yep. So here you see, and I know it's hard to see it on a slide, but if you do get to look at the presentation in more detail later on, basically the process here is we have to train people to be highly competent at fire and explosive investigations. So there's a whole process to get them to that point for both the fire and explosive side of the house. Then once they get to that level, they have to continue to develop, maintain, and enhance their expertise. And this just shows some of the things they are doing to do that. And then also the actual operational side of the house, where they're actually, they actually know how to go out and do these kinds of things and do them to a very high standard. The other component here, and that we realized that would be important to this standard, is we needed to actually also go to the members of the program to see what they felt about the program itself, how it was being implemented, work that they do. So last month we created an NRT member survey. There's approximately, what was there, weighing about 120?
Yeah, about 124, I think it was.
Yep. And we got a response rate to that survey exceeding 50%, which is way better than industry standards for these kinds of things. And again, we use SurveyMonkey as our tool for doing this with the Likert scale to be consistent with all of our other NCDER customer satisfaction surveys. And then you can see some of the results of the survey. Again, the key thing is we're looking for that score, overall score, being above a 4.0. Anything less than that, it's not that it necessarily is a problem, but it needs to be scrutinized. It needs to be looked at It's possible that the management needs to take a hard look at that issue, even, you know, that could entail a corrective action or whatever the case may be. And so you see here, I did highlight, and it's, interestingly enough, the question about our team members are appropriately rewarded for their service to the NRT. And that was the only score that came in under 4.0. And I was kind of curious to why that is, because when I had been in the program, there was a financial reward system for participation in the team, so that if you did 25 call-outs, you were eligible for a $2,500 cash award, and if you hit 50, it was a $5,000 cash reward, which is a pretty good, you know, system to recognize the members for their longevity, you know. And each and every call-out is, you know, is a lot of time out of their personal time and their regular work time away from their families. So I wondered why that was below 4. It turns out that they did away with that cash award system. So I think this is a little bit of pushback from the members that they probably would like to see that come back, which I don't blame them. But you can see all the other ones. Definitely we're getting good scores from the members. So that reflects also on management and how they're running the program. Kind of takes us to our takeaways. So the key here is, you know, the standard, did we need to go through this process with the standard? No, we don't need to, but we feel that, you know, we definitely want to show transparency in that we're trying to be the best that we can be within what we do. And so that was part of the mentality and the vision that led to us getting ISO accredited, and it's consistent with us now submitting a bid for the G1 assessment. But you can see that, you know, when you're designing and implementing a QMS, it's going to basically serve both those purposes, whether you choose accreditation or this G1 standard. They both, and this is key, provide third-party non-governmental review, and they're being done by well-respected non-government sources, ASQ, ANSI, whoever the case may be, whatever accreditation entity that you're working with, and they naturally complement each other. Accreditation, you know, as I mentioned before, it provides a certain level of public customer assurance that the program is both meaningful and effective. So I like to tell everybody, this is basically the government not patting itself on the back. Yes, we've always thought this program did a good job. We got a lot of positive feedback from our customers. But now we're allowing these non-governmental entities to come in and validate that that is exactly what is happening with our program. System and process mapping can be an excellent tool for mapping a path to change management. It can also serve as a great tool for identifying those gaps and things you need to get from point A to point B, and also identifying risks. You know, a big part of risk management with any program is, you know, what's the one thing that's going to take the program down? That's the one thing you really want to avoid. And obviously, there's more than one reason usually, but I would say with the case of the NRT, a big risk would be lack of executive management buy-in. All it would take is for them to say, no, we don't, you know, our money's better served. We can't really spend money on that, and the whole thing would fall apart. And that's, you know, unfortunately, that's how easy it can happen. The benefit of that is with the ASQ ANSI G1 standard, there's no cost involved with doing that. Assessment comes at no cost, so that's a real plus. Customer feedback is, again, it's an essential metric for creating and maintaining any kind of a program that deals with external customers, and also having the culture to deal with the criticism. So it's my favorite one I like to throw around is complaint is a gift. You know, sometimes do that mockingly, but to have that kind of a culture is very important. You know, you cannot take complaints and say, well, they don't know what they're talking about, because sometimes there's patterns and there's things you can learn. Very important. Appropriate performance management metrics are necessity. And they're going to be required, you know, if you're doing the standard or ISO accreditation. Oops, I think I went, there we go. So we're going to continue to pursue additional accreditation for other NCDER programs. Right now we're focusing on our 2 personnel certification programs for the CES and the Certified Explosive Specialist and Certified Fire Investigator programs. We're looking to accredit them. And then also G1 assessment of our other functions as well. Of course, you know, when you do go through these processes, and they can be very comprehensive, and there could be a lot entailed with them, is if you are successful, you should make everybody aware of that success, you know, not only internally but externally as well. I think, you know, I feel really important that, you know, everybody knows the NRT is the one and only universally accredited, you know, scene and investigative team that's out there in the federal government. And conforming to external standards, it's all good and well. It does, for some agencies, it does force you to kind of recreate the wheel to really be able to apply these things. But they're also very consistent with the current priorities of the presidential management agenda. The vision, which includes delivering excellent federal services and improved customer experience, and strengthening and empowering the federal workforce. So we are doing metrics within the NRT that definitely speak to both of those priorities. So that concludes our presentation. Wayne, just before we kind of take questions, do you want to chime in with any clarification or any of your comments?
Yes, one of the things that happened was in 2016, when I came on board with NCDER, was looking at their quality management systems that currently existed within the organization. The federal government has a lot of policies, procedures, manuals, documents, and basically they had somewhat of a quality management system, but it was scattered amongst multiple documents. And the volume of documents was about 2 foot high in 6 3-ring binders. I looked at that and decided, well, they somewhat have a quality management system, but it's very incoherent. It's scattered amongst too many regulations. So when we pulled everything inside NCDER and actually wrote our quality manual at that point. So basically from 2017 forward, we had a QMS within NCDER that was specific to NCDER. And that's one of the things you're going to see in a lot of the federal government agencies is they will say they have a quality management system, but they really don't. It's just too disjointed. So more than likely, if you go or if you belong to a federal agency or you're going into a federal agency, you're going to see this, where they will say that they have a quality management system, but they really don't.
Thank you.
Okay, great, Wayne.
We have a few questions in queue. So I'm going to pick the first one. The customer satisfaction data is very impressive. Would you mind discussing how the initial customer satisfaction criteria was developed?
That's a great question, because the initial development of that process was actually mandated by Congress, and I don't know all the details of what happened and why, but basically
OMB, I believe, Office of Management and Budget.
Yeah, so basically the NRT was forced to do this because it wasn't something they did at first, and although it turned out to be a great tool and it's a great way to look at what we're doing, whether we're being successful. So some of those questions had to do specifically with like the timeliness and whether the competency, whether the people that were coming to work there knew what the heck they were doing in the first place, and whether enough resources, equipment, and other resources were appropriate for the scope of the incident. But of course, then when we started going forward with our quality management system, We just basically refined it down to, we're looking for any of the metrics that reflect on customer satisfaction.
Yeah, when I came aboard, I looked at their existing survey system that they had, and all we did was just tweak it a little bit to fit into our QMS. There's very minor changes we had to some wording, but that basically solved all of our problems. So.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, why does ASQ ANSI G1 standard only apply to government operations? And is there a similar standard for non-governmental entities?
Wayne, you want to tackle that one?
Well, the G1 standard is specific to government agencies. The standard that applies to non-government agencies is 9001. The federal government and state governments, and county governments, cities, stuff like that, they have a lot of laws, regulations, and requirements that you won't see in the civilian side. For example, the NRT runs under U.S. code, U.S. federal laws, so there's laws established at Congress that we have to apply to our quality standards, where a civilian agency doesn't have that restriction.
So the third question is, what is the difference between ASQ ANSI G1 standards and ISO 9001?
Well, obviously the ISO being a universal standard that was based on universal consensus, it does entail still having a foundational quality management system that's 9001 conforming. And there's a lot of similarities, except with the G1 standard, it's just very specific to government operations and services and holding management accountable. In the ISO standard, there's no assessment on holding management accountable, but it's kind of built into the quality management system. But the G1 standard, that's very specific to that, to ensuring that even though we're doing all these things, who's being held accountable for what we're doing.
Okay. We went through all the questions. I don't know if anybody wants to send another question. We're not receiving anything. Larry, you want to say a word?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Wayne. It's very insightful, and I'm glad to see more partners picking up the G1 standard and applying it. It's a great topic. It's honestly the work that you do, affects all of us, and that's important. I love the presentation. I love how some of the questions was coming and asking things about the difference between the G1 standard, how it's applied, why where it's effective as compared to maybe other say quality management systems, things like that. There's an accountability quotient. There is a maturity quotient. There is an alignment quotient. With the G1 standard, not saying that others don't, but that alignment kind of comes with the results and the accountability. And as addressed, the government space operates a little different than, say, the product environment, or even other service environments in the commercial space that is not necessarily governed or oversaw directly by statute regulations at the federal, state, or local level. So we're very proud of the standard. We're very proud of those who contributed to the development of the standard, such as Wayne and some others that are on this webinar. We are very proud of our partners for stepping up and stepping into it. Accountability is not necessarily the easiest thing to step into and really base how mature and capable are your processes and systems of rendering results for your customers. And in this sense, with the G1 and the NRT, the customers is the public. It is the residents of states and municipalities and countries, and it's important to ensure quality at every step and produce value at every step and acknowledge when you're not. I really thank you guys very much for this enlightening and delightful presentation and demonstrating the application maturity and accountability that you're providing to all of us. I think I might have saw, and you tell me if there was any more questions that came flying through the chat, as we were kind of on the wrap up. Is there anything else?
Yes, so someone asked if they could get a copy of the G1 standards.
Okay, so the copy of the G1 standard is not a free standard. Let me just lay that out. It is, I think it costs $30, and you can find it on our ASQ.org site. I believe it would be found under Books and Standards. I think it costs like $30. It's encrypted and all this kind of good stuff. So, but that's where you would actually find that standard. So, yes, you can get a copy for $30. But,
there's another question. Why did you not apply for the Baltimores Award?
Well, that's a great question because it's certainly been part of our discussion. Wayne knows a little bit more about this, but I think every state has some type of equivalent.
Yes. And Alabama has that, the Baldridge.
Yeah.
Award.
So we kind of were led in with some good advice was to maybe consider that first, and then if we're successful in that, then maybe moving on to Baldridge. I certainly think that we are kind of heading in that direction, but we'd like to see a lot of our other NCDER components, our training programs, our personnel certification programs, also be universally either accredited or at least assessed under the G1 standard before we did that. So and I just wanted to touch on something that you, when I was listening to you, Larry, was, a lot of times too, we always have to think about the cost of quality and how that affects this. And I can tell you that in what the work that we do, the cost of quality or lack of quality can be very significant, because I was given advice one time when I was a younger agent by an assistant U.S. attorney about lawsuits, and he said, hey, there's the good news is there's only 2 reasons you can be sued. He goes, the bad news is it's for anything you do or anything you don't do. So it's very important, because if we are not getting good customer satisfaction, it not only may be that, yeah, it's bad, gives us a black eye or whatever, but it could also impact what's going on with an underlying criminal or civil case. If we're providing biased results or we're providing incompetent services, believe me, that the cost of that lack of quality can be very, very detrimental to an entity. So,
very good.
Thank you. There's another question. What efficiencies have you seen since you implemented system mapping after accreditation?
The biggest thing for us was when we put it down on paper and mapped it out, it was to identify if we had any gaps. And also, it does realize that it kind of naturally lays out what risk can be, but we were really more concerned with, is there something along our process that could be done differently or is not being done? But when it came down to it, we were pretty happy with what it looked like on paper, even though we had kind of by default created this process because people just, trying to do the right thing. It turned out that the process really was critical to making the NRT what it has always been. And I tell you, for me personally, being on the team, sometimes I felt like the dumbest person around with some of the folks I worked with. when I was working on the TWA 800 investigation, I was part of the center fuel tank reconstruction team. And, you know, I'm not an aeronautical engineer. I've never spent a day working in the aviation industry. But it just amazed me at the level of expertise that people, you know, it's kind of like they were holding it in their back pocket. Oh yeah, by the way, I know about this, this, and this, and you just be like, okay. And I learned to be at one with a micrometer. I never knew the importance, but it's the little technical things that you learn from some of these other members that are very helpful when you become a part of that team. And hopefully by the end, I was able to lend some expertise to others. But I was wholly impressed with the level of expertise that team has been staffed with and still is to this day.
Okay, we're going to take one more question. Can you discuss how leadership buy-in was developed? Was it mandated, or was there a voluntary movement to shift the cultural to one of continuous improvement?
Really, what it came down to is somebody somewhere, before I was involved with this, at the executive level. And when I say executive level, I'm talking not just NCDER, but at the ATF as a government bureau level. Somebody thought that, you know, it would be very important to accredit some of our critical components of our mission, and that would include training that creates the type of people that we have that do fire and explosives investigations, and then forensic service. Because obviously, again, if you don't have what it takes to be successful when you're providing forensic services, that cost of lack of quality is going to come back and bite you big time. So I think basically at that level, when they developed the strategic goals, they saw that as a very important part of our strategic goals. And so we just kind of took that and ran with it as, you know, aligning what we do with that goal. Now we're supposed to be coming out with some new strategic goals here very shortly. I have no idea what's in the new ones. I would hope that they have continued to have that buy-in for that type of thing. But, you know,
yeah,
like
I think the ATF strategic goals are on a 4-year cycle. So the one that we've been working with has been the 2018 to 2022 strategic goals.
Yep. And
No,
I was just going to add, so that executive buy-in at the highest level has been important, but also at the NCDER level, the person who's in charge of NCDER has, of course, it's been different people, but they've all had a very high commitment to this, to quality management and what we're doing.
Okay. So someone, I assume it's a short answer. Someone asked, could you envision the IRS using the ANSI G1 standards?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It might be just a matter of narrowing it down to specific entities that might be better served for it. I don't know how that would work with an entire government department trying to do that kind of assessment. That'd be quite the task for ASQ to.
Yeah, that'd be a lot.
Yeah, but that's a eat the elephant one bite at a time. So yeah, look at. I think you really hit on it. Core components, critical components, and focus in on that for your maturity of process, system, and accountability. So
yes, especially the IRS branch that handles my refund checks.
Yes, I'd like them to get it right.
All right.
All right.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for joining. We're right at 1 o'clock. Thank you both, Bob and Wayne.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for attending. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Great work.
Thank you, ma'am.